birds, we find our worth in giving birth and stuff. We're landing our homes against winding roads, and we think the going is tough. We pick songs to sing, remind us of things that nobody cares about. And honestly, we're probably more suicidal than ever now. If you decide to live by what you think's wrong and what's right, believe me, you'll begin to wish you were sleeping. Your weeping will creep in your head and you'll cry. But if we wake up every morning and decide what we believe, we can take apart our very heart and the light will set us free.
What is Dema but an isle of flightless birds?
The people can't go anywhere. They're just locked in this, island of authoritarian theocracy. Just chillin'. It's surrounded by walls. If you escape, you get brought back.
Clancy says, this village, after all of this time, was my trap.
Birds that can't fly away is a pretty apt comparison.
Now from Rock Sound, September 2018, according to Tyler, it's better if people don't know just how long ago the basis for this narrative was formed. It's a story he says he always intended to tell, though not necessarily through music, and not necessarily involving Blurryface. So that's pretty old. This might be an idea that was pre-music, and I think you can hear him beginning to tell it in Isle of Flightless Birds, in March to the Sea, in Going Down, and see it realized, given life in Trench.
Now here's what I'm not saying.
I'm not saying Tyler had every detail of Trench planned out from the beginning.
I'm saying just like the duality of Vessel grew into the persona of Blurryface, this critique of society grew over years into this world where it could really be played out. It developed. So let's look at the beginnings of that.
Normality, conformity, stillness, fake faith, and forgery all seem to be a major key to why the day-to-day will seem to be a melting dream that we once had, but now the dream is weak, but now that we all...
Now in March to the Sea and Isle of Flightless Birds, you get more showing rather than telling, but in this case he's just going to tell us that normality and conformity are the reasons he has this sense of unreality in his day-to-day.
He just says it outright. So let's set this here for now and we're going to come back to it. Showing rather than telling will be a little more like Isle of Flightless Birds. He's going to paint us a picture of the suburbs and homes lined against winding roads and people giving birth to find worth and listening to songs they don't give a shit about, and that sense of normalcy.
All we are is an isle of flightless birds. We find our worth in giving birth and stuff. We're landing our homes against winding roads, and we think the going is tough. We pick songs to sing, remind us of things that nobody cares about. And honestly, we're probably more suicidal than ever now.
He describes a way of living that is both normal and lethal.
So let's set that right here next to Going Down. We're talking about themes here, if that's not clear. Now let's look at March to the Sea.
And about this time of every year, the line will go to the ocean pier and walk right off into the sea. And then we fall asleep.
So there's this line that everyone gets in, and it ends in their death. It's about conformity, right? Conformity and lethality. So let's go ahead and put this right there. And what I mean by lethality is, like in Isle of Flightless Birds, he says, we're more suicidal than ever now. In March to the Sea, this conformity culminates in death. But that's not where these stories end. Check it out.
Why we cry, it means to an end that we die. Vultures to fly cause we're free. Free cause I know I've seen the end of me, so we need to... Then out of the corner of my eye, I see a spaceship in the sky. And I am cold. Can you hear? I will fly with no hope, no fear.
Whether it's in a spaceship or as a bird that's meant to fly or not, there's something about flight that Tyler thinks is going to deliver him from this cycle of conformity and spiritual death. You could even say that sometimes we will die and sometimes we will fly away. And that idea of flight to break free is exactly what we see with Dema.
Yeah, the vulture is it's just an important part of the narrative of the record in the city of Dema. The vulture represents so much to the inhabitants of Dema because it's one of the only things, only creatures they see that leaves and comes back. And it almost becomes a sense of inspiration to see that vulture leaving the wall of Dema and being able to fly wherever it wants, and yet it still comes back. And so if you're from Dema, you look at that vulture as kind of something that represents who you want to become.
The story has grown. There's a bird that is not flightless, that you can aspire to be, and those are the Bandidos. This cracks me up because it's like they just put a label on that one. It's like they really didn't want us to miss it, Bandido equals vulture. Anyway, you could spend an hour on early songs and flight and stuff like that, but what I want to get to is this.
Gnawing on the bishops, claw away up this system, repeat.
He's talking about himself as a vulture. These verbs make sense for a bird, not a person. This is my rendition of Tyler gnawing on a bishop. It doesn't make as much sense as a vulture. Why would you say you are gnawing on somebody? That's not a thing people do. He was already talking about himself as a bandido in this song, back in 2015. I mean, he was even kind of dressing as one. There is, of course, the dead giveaway of the mention of bishops, but also the visuals for doubt are the doubt pattern over an aerial view of a city. Which, come on. So there are parts of the story we can see way back in 2008, and there are parts that we can see early as 2015. Also, interestingly, at the end of those visuals, the city falls. So is this foreshadowing? When all the cages are empty, will the city fall? The visuals relieve the city take us through the city, through the necropolis, up over the wall, and out into freedom.
I will stay alive in time. I will leave the city for now. I will stay alive.
But back to the whole point here. Going Down as a song will straight up tell us that normality and conformity are a problem. March to the Sea and I Love Flightless Birds show us through description, and Trench is going to show us the same thing, the same arc, through Clancy's letters. The end of Clancy's first letter is basically this nostalgic love letter to conformity, until eventually we end up with a black letter that calls Dema this concrete coffin of a city. Conformity, disillusionment, the comparison to death, followed by flight. This flight is both an old story and a new story. So next up, maybe, we'll talk about fire.
I'm flying from a fire.